Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new edition of Let's Talk About Education with Antonio Corrales. As you know, during the past year, career and technology have become a prevalent topic across schools. Students, parents, administrators, and state officials and federal officials have been looking to career and technology programs as an alternative for students to pursue a career beyond or besides academic careers. Well, today we had the honor to have with us Kai Bouchard, who is a principal of a career and technology school, a high school. He's a seasoned educator and somebody who's going to explain us in simple terms why career and technology is so important and how does it look like nowadays to have a career and technology program. Kai, thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem. Thanks for interviewing me. My cell phone just went off, so I'm gonna
Absolutely.
silence it.
Don't worry about it. We're actually in Kai School, which is absolutely fantastic because I think it's a great opportunity for our audience to kind of get to know and get familiarized with career and technology as a topic, as a program that is so important nowadays across schools in the nation and is receiving a lot of funds from the federal government for the past years. So let's talk a little bit about that. But let's start with your career. Let's start with you. Why don't we introduce you to the audience and kind of letting them know how do you get to where you are right now?
Okay. Well, I have a big passion for career and technology education. I actually started as a social studies teacher, so this wasn't really where I started with my career. But I taught for 5 years in the state of Hawaii, and I taught basically all of the different social studies classes. And after 5 years, I got my administrative education, master's and got my certification, becoming a school administrator. So I served as a school administrator here in the state of Texas. We moved here in 2008, and so I've been a school administrator for about 10 years, starting off as an assistant principal and then an associate principal. And then about this time last year, I moved over to this district, and I work in Pearland ISD now, and I'm the head principal of Robert Turner College and Career High School. So it was a little bit of a jump for me, but my passion for career and technical education kind of stems from a lot of the experiences that I had as an assistant principal. And one of the big problems that I found with being an assistant principal was that when I was working with a student who for whatever reason wasn't college bound, whether that was because of a family dynamic they were coming out of, the family didn't have enough money, or maybe they were a family that had just moved to this country from another country, or for whatever reason, if that student believed and their family believed that they weren't college material, for whatever reason it was, then I frequently found that those students lost interest in school and started to struggle. Sorry for that.
Okay.
We're running our bell schedule here today. And it was frustrating for me to work with an at-risk student and not really have a hook to keep them in school or a plan B, because the old saying of, the American dream is to come and to study hard in school and to go to college, and everyone can do it, and it's appropriate for everyone. That line of thinking doesn't always work. And so I was frustrated as an assistant principal, and the more I learned about career and technical education, the more I realized that this is the vehicle that we can use to kind of work with disenchanted students and provide them with a great positive pathway towards a productive future. And I don't mean to demean the college dream or whatever, but it's not there for every single student, and it might not be appropriate for every student. And for those that know that they're not going to college or whatever, this is the best means of providing them with a pathway towards being a productive citizen, being a successful family person who can provide for their family and have a good career. And so that is what initially began to excite me. I started my doctoral program, and career and technical education plays a large focus in that. My research has to do with the relationship between career and technical education programs and high school dropout rates, and how schools can specifically use CTE programs to prevent dropouts. And so it's kind of been a passion of mine for the last 5-10 years, and I'm extremely fortunate to have landed in this position because our school is pretty special, and we can do some pretty amazing things here at Turner High School.
Well, why don't we? I mean, you have said a lot of interesting things. For our folks out there that have no idea what career and technology means in practical terms, can you, simple terms, what does that program mean for students in terms of, courses and the other thing is, where does it start? Does it start in ninth grade, or can it start before that?
Okay, so I think, in a small history lesson, back in the 50s and the 60s, schools had vocational programs. It was voc-ec or whatever, and basically they would take students, put them in a shop class if they weren't college bound or whatever, but then the education system in general in the United States began to abuse that idea. At first, it started with a very good and a positive purpose, but as time went on, I think in the reading that I've done and the stories that I've heard after talking with people is that throughout the course of education history in our country, we started to abuse that, and so we would take students who were just difficult to work with for whatever reason, and we would put them in a shop setting and leave them in that setting all day. It was very an isolated thing, and they weren't really getting skills. It was just a means of taking a student that was difficult to educate and isolating them in a certain part of the building. And so vocational education kind of developed a negative reputation, and meanwhile, in the country, there were things like No Child Left Behind and other educational legislation that came around that started to really go with the idea that everyone should go to college. And I remember being in high school in the 90s, and at least where I was living, the culture was that if you didn't go directly from high school to a 4-year university, got a bachelor's degree, and then started a family, and then started a productive career, if you didn't do those 4 things and those 4 in that particular sequence, you were a failure.
You were a failure.
Yeah, and we know now that that's not the case, and that the American dream isn't something that should be put into a box where you need to hit these milestones in exactly this order, and everyone's got to do it exactly the same way.
Doesn't necessarily have to be tied up to academics.
Correct. In many situations they can be, but in many situations we've got students that go to college, that they'll do their 4 years of university study. They'll get a bachelor's degree in philosophy or English, and then they graduate from school and they can't get a job. And so the workforce has changed too. It's become much more technical, much more specialized. And so the systems that we have in place in education need to be also specialized and also technical. And we need to prepare the students for jobs by giving them the hard and the soft skills that they'll need to get there. And the traditional college programs don't always do that for all of our jobs.
Well, so let's talk about in practical terms for your particular school, because I think it's a great example to kind of explain to our audience, teachers, administrators, and even principals and superintendents who may be looking at us right now. Your school, your high school, is a really special place, in a very particular place. Number one, I remember I've been knowing you for quite a while already, but I remember one of the first things that you realized is that the type of students that apply to your high school aren't necessarily the A+ students, but are students who have a decent academic level, but they're looking for alternatives besides the academic. So for the audience, can you explain how does your high school work? And within the career and technology, what options do the students have to pursue a career and start making good money? Because what you're saying is that with career and technology, the students doesn't necessarily have to go to a particular college to end up getting good jobs and getting good income.
So our school is a little unique, and it's similar to a lot of new schools that are popping up around the area. There are school districts all around our neighboring school districts that are trying to solve the career and technical education puzzle in different ways. And so there are a lot of different models when it comes to CTE schools. This particular school, Turner College and Career High School, we are a standalone school, and so we have CTE programs. We have our normal core academic classes, math, science, social studies, and all of that. And then we also have a very good relationship with Alvin Community College. And they send their professors to our campus to teach dual credit classes. And so our students also have the ability to take dual credit classes on our campus. So really, we're a CTE school, we're a normal high school, and we're an early college high school, all kind of wrapped into one. The students that come here live within the Pearland ISD zones, but nobody is zoned to this school. And so, in a sense, we're kind of like a magnet school to where students from Pearland High School or Dawson High School can transfer to our campus and be a part of our programs. On the dual credit side of things, we have the ability for our students to graduate with an associate's degree by the time that they graduate from high school. So last year, for instance, we had 85 students, which is roughly 1/3 of our graduating class, also graduated with an associate's degree through Alvin Community College. On top of that, we have our career and technical education programs. And so we have probably 14 to 16 pathways that our students will take. And so when they come to us, each student will choose a career pathway that they want to work on. And those pathways range from information technology to engineering to EMT, so they can become a certified paramedic, to nursing programs. We have a CNA program, to dental, environmental science, HVAC, welding. And so we have 14 to 16, I can't remember the exact number, of CTE programs that the students will take. So when they come, in their freshman year, they'll take the introductory class, and in their sophomore year, they advance. And by the time they get to their senior year, most of those students are now working in the community at different practicum locations, and so they're working internships. And so there might be a student that goes to a vet clinic because they're in our vet tech program, and they work as a vet technician.
Well, and one of the things that you have here is that you have great facilities adapted or aligned to those needs. Because I remember when we, walking around and seeing, tremendous, the welding component, the nursing component. You have the support of great facilities to allow the students to develop those skills.
Right. And we're very lucky to have those. This high school originally was an existing high school before our school concept was even created and the school began. And over time, we've been open now, this is our 6th year. Over time, we've kind of been retrofitting our building to fit our CTE programs. Our community passed a bond in 2016, and so that construction is going on, and we're adding new programs. We're going to add a culinary program to our building here for next year. And so over the course of time, we are adapting our building and our facilities to meet those needs. Going back to vet tech, we have local veterinarians that come in, and we have a surgery room within our vet tech room where the vets can come in and perform spay and neuter surgeries on animals from the Humane Society. And our students have the opportunity to either from behind the glass watch and observe the operation, and we have a couple of students that actually can go into the room and assist in those situations. And so CTE programs is all about identifying career pathways, working with students and the community, and bringing those community partners together with the students and exposing them to what this career is all about, and giving them learning opportunities that are not necessarily the traditional learning opportunities they would have in a classroom. And so it's a really cool dynamic that we have.
So let me ask you this, because I remember in one of our meetings, you meeting with a committee of a particular program. So how does a student decide what path to follow within the career and technology program? And number two, how do you decide as an organization what type of program to offer? Do you guys have in those communities? Do you have like liaison with companies or industries that guide you and tell you, veterinarian is an area that we may need help, or culinary arts. How do you come out with that decision, for your programs and then for the students?
So when the community decided to open this school, and this was about 6-7 years ago, the district sent out a survey to the entire community, asking what kinds of programs they would be interested in. And we got a lot of feedback as a district about what the community would like to see. And we took that data and we started to create advisory, and I say we, I wasn't here at the time. So they created these advisory committees to where they would bring industry experts from each field to come together to advise the school district as to, if you're going to have this program, what kinds of facilities would you need? What are the materials that you would run through over the course of a given year, and so the consumables that would have to be repurchased, and what would the cost to all of that be? If we're going to provide intern opportunities for our students, are those intern opportunities out there and available in the community? And is there some sort of symbiotic relationship that could be developed between our students and the community? In other words, can we send our students to go work in an internship that would ultimately be mutually beneficial for that student and for the business partner? And so cultivating those partnerships is a big deal for us.
And how do you advise the students to say, for example, David, you need to take culinary arts, or your call is veterinarian, or how do you go by that?
So during our application process, we have a window where interested families in our school can apply to our school, and then once that window is closed, then we call in every single one of those families, and we'll have a meeting. We call them a academic advising meeting with those families, and we'll bring in the family and we'll bring in the student, and we'll ask them, what is it about our school that interests you? And so some of the students will say, I'm really interested in getting an associate's degree, and so we're very interested in the dual credit piece of it. Or, I really am interested to become a welder. I'd really like to be a welder, or whatever program. Now, sometimes they'll come in and they'll not have a very specific idea. I want to go down this pathway or this pathway. But really, we just try to narrow it down and say, well, in which areas are you interested? Are you interested in a career in medicine? Are you interested in a career working with computers? Do you like working with your hands, with tools and those sorts of things? Are you interested in culinary? Do you like food? Those sorts of things. And then as we have that conversation with them, they may say, I love doctors, but I don't want anything to do with blood, and so we will then direct them away from the medical pathways.
So they have meetings with the counselors?
Yes, they meet with counselors and administrators, and we meet with every single interested family. And so this is something that's a little bit different than what your typical high school will do, because your typical high school, a comprehensive high school, the students are zoned there and they're coming no matter what. Whereas for us, we need to have a conversation with the family and really sell the school to the family, and talk to them about the things that we can do and the things that we do really well, and what kind of programs they'd be interested in. I would say that most students have a pretty good idea, or the families have a pretty good idea in 8th grade about their general interests. Now, some will come and say, I want to be a doctor, or I want to do this, or I want to be a welder, but we know that they're going to change their mind over time. So generally what we're looking at is their interests, and then we will propose a couple of classes that they can take to see if that's truly what they want to do. And then if it's not, then we have, so we pull those students back in, and every single year we meet with them, we talk about their 4-year plan, and we adjust over time. And then the data we collect in those meetings is the data that we use to determine how many sections of each class that we offer.
Now, when looking at your school, I know in talking about the selection process, I know that you guys are almost at full capacity, right?
We are at full capacity.
You are at full capacity. We talk about the success of the school. So let's talk about how do you measure success in your school? because usually, you have in regular high schools, you have graduation rates, you have number of students accepted in college, etc. So in your case, with such a particular concept, which is a great alternative for students, for example, who don't have too many resources, that can do those dual credits and get almost a bachelor afterwards for only 2 years. How do you measure success in your school?
Well, we have always measured success by in a couple of areas. We measure the dual credit success by how many of our seniors, or what percentage of our graduating class, go on to get an associate's degree, and so that's a huge thing. To have 1/3 of our graduating seniors walk out with an associate's degree is a huge measure of success, and so we always kind of look at that too. We look at the number of certifications that our students pass, industry certifications that they take. So, for instance, if a student goes into a welding pathway, there's the NCCER core certification, and that's the certification that's basically given to those people that go into construction sciences, so welders, engineers. It's the basic construction certification, and then they can get a couple of welding certifications while they're with us. And if they were to go and work on a job site, that NCCER core is an important deal, because it's just one thing that they can put on their resume. If they go into an interview and talk about construction or whatever, wanting to join a construction crew, the employer is going to want to see that, and it gives them a leg up versus any applicant that wouldn't have that certification.
Have you guys started measuring the number of the percentage of students who are able to find jobs afterwards, or you haven't been able to?
We haven't done that because we're relatively new as a school.
Yeah.
This is the first year that we've had graduation data. Our graduation rate last year, and this is the first year that they took the 4-year graduation rate, it was 99.1%. And so our graduation rate was actually really good in all of our sub-pops. African American, Hispanic, Eco-Dis, all of those had 100% graduation rates. We had just like 1 or 2 students not get it, and they were in the Caucasian subgroup. So our graduation data is very good. Last year our graduating seniors, we had 263 seniors, about something like that, and we had over 680 industry certifications that had been earned by those 200 students, and so our graduates are earning 2 or 3 certifications before they graduate, and so that's a big measure of success.
That's fantastic. Now, for our future administrators out there, maybe teachers who are looking at us and looking at a pathway to become school administrators, how does that dynamic for you, in this school as a principal? Is there similar to being a high school principal in another school? You have experience being an administrator in a regular high school. What are the differences, or do you have similar disciplinary issues? Do you have similar academic issues? Talk a little bit about that.
So we're very specific about not being exclusive, and so our application process essentially is, if you apply, and we'll basically look for 3 criteria to see if you would be a good fit for our campus. We don't look at GPA. We don't look at socioeconomic status or anything like that. We basically look to see if the student requires special education services. We do offer special education services, but not every single program. For instance, we don't have a life skills program on our campus. So if there's a student that had a disability that required a specific special ed service that we can't provide, then they're kind of screened out. We also look at attendance and discipline. And so if a student has a questionable discipline history coming from junior high, because we're sending most of our students out into the workforce, we need to ensure that the students that go out into the workforce can represent the school and the community in a positive way. And so that if they have a pretty strict or pretty severe discipline history, then they're not immediately accepted. And then we also look at attendance, because in order to operate our school, we operate on a block system. So each of our classes meets 3 days a week. And so if a student has a history of chronic absences, that is an indicator to us that they're probably not going to be successful here, because if you miss 1 day, it's like missing 2 days on a traditional campus that has a traditional 7-bell schedule.
So, but if somebody look at from afar, your day by day will look like pretty similar to a regular principal. You
Yes.
still have your department meetings, you still have your curriculum meetings,
Yes.
your data analysis meeting, but you still have to take standardized testing.
We have all that. Our students all take the STAR accountability test, so we still have all of those things. I would say the two main differences are, and where I was going with that is, we still, we accept students and they come in and they're ours. So once they're in, they are Turner High School students for the rest of their high school career. So we still have those sorts of dynamics that go on, and so we deal with discipline just like any administrator at any other school.
I remember you telling us that you don't have sport teams, so you don't
Correct.
have like a mascot.
Right.
Well,
and so that's a big difference too. So we don't have sports here. We allow our students to travel to the 2 other high schools to participate in UIL activities. So they can be on an athletic team, or they can be in the band or whatever. So we don't have that on our campus. So one big difference for us is we still need to figure out ways, creative ways, of having activities where students can feel as though they're not missing the general traditional high school experience. So a question is, how do you have homecoming if you don't have a football team? So what do you do to make that week special for the students, and what kinds of activities do you put into place to ensure that the students that come here aren't missing out? We still have prom, we still have homecoming, we still have those sorts of things.
that they feel that they can still have the high school experience.
Yes, it's very important to our students, and we need to convince our students while they're in 8th grade that even though you come to us, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to miss out on everything else. And so, yes, we're a little bit different, but that is a challenge that the administrators have. We don't have those sorts of things, and so as an administrator on a comprehensive high school campus, every Friday night you're going to have to go and work the football game and make sure that the students are acting right in the stands, and so you have all those nighttime things. We still have nighttime things here, but they're typically supplemental things that we have to put on to ensure that students are still getting the thing. So, for example, we do a lock-in on our campus that's open to the entire campus, and it's a big event. It's run by our National Honor Society, and our students come and we lock them in, and they have access to the whole building, and we rent like roller skates to have kind of like a roller derby kind of thing going on in one of the gyms, and we have laser tag, and we have all these kinds of things because we need to provide memorable experiences, those kinds of moments that you think back on, at your 20-year reunion, those kinds of experiences that make high school special. Because our hope is that our students don't look back at their time and say, you know what, that welding class was was great. We need to provide the welding experience to line them up so they're successful after high school, but we also need to provide them opportunities to have memorable experiences and to be kids and to enjoy their time at school. And so that's a challenge that we have that's a little bit different.
What recommendation would you give a superintendent looking at us right now, or school leaders, board members, or even state officials or federal officials who look at your experience and see how successful it has been, and are willing to do the same in their districts and their counties? What recommendation would you give them to?
Well, it's interesting too, because this is going to be a question that a lot of us superintendents are asking right now, especially those that are in relatively smaller towns and areas that are not as big as where we live, because TEA, the Texas Educational Agency, has changed accountability now, and they have added CCMR, stands for college career military readiness. And so now the state is judging every single school and every single school district as to how well they prepare students for post-secondary school. And there are a number of factors they look at. I think they look at 7 factors when they're looking at the CCMR. And some of the things they look at are SAT scores and ACT scores. That's old. We've always been looking at those sorts of things. They look at AP participation and AP scores, and that's again something that they've always looked at. But they also look at the TSI test, which is the test that gets students into a community college. They look at how many students are enrolling in the military, how many students are getting industry credentials and industry certifications like what we provide here, and they look at a couple of other factors. When they look at those factors, they judge every single senior in the graduating class, and they give a point to every single senior who has fulfilled one of those 7 roles. And then the school is then judged and given a letter grade as to how well they prepare students for post-secondary readiness. Now, CTE programs solve a lot of those things. If a student goes through a 4-year sequence, a coherent sequence of CTE courses, they get half a point for every student that goes through that. Every student that gets an industry certification that's on the approved list with TEA, they get a point there. And every student that gets an associate's degree or takes in excess of 9 hours of dual credit, they get points there. So there's a new accountability system, and CTE factors in heavily there. And so now, and this is the first year that system is in place, school districts are scrambling to figure out how do we now set up a program that solves two purposes. One is right by kids, and it sets up kids for post-secondary success. And two, because that is so important, how do we do it in such a way that that we fit in with what the state is looking at?
The criteria.
The criteria.
Yeah.
And what systems can we put into place?
So your prediction is that these type of initiatives are gonna expand?
Oh, CTE schools are booming all over the place. Every year you hear about a new CTE school that's being built somewhere. And what's very interesting about it is that there is no one model that works for every single district. In just thinking of the districts that surround Pearland ISD, one of our neighboring districts is relatively big, and they've got a great model. They've got 5 high schools, and they split their CTE programs, and they put 2 CTE programs on each of the 5 comprehensive high schools, and any student from any one of those high schools can travel in between the campuses and meet their needs that way. So that particular district didn't need to build a CTE building. They were large enough to share their resources, and so it's a great model for them. In smaller districts where you don't have so many schools, they'll take an existing building and they'll convert that, much like what Pearland did, into a CTE building, where the high school students on one campus would then travel and spend part of the day on a CTE campus and then go back. And now that CTE campus is not a standalone school, but they travel and they service all of the students within that particular district. And so that would be a model. The model that we have, where we are a standalone school that has a CTE and a dual credit focus, is another model. And it's actually, I think it's a pretty unique model. There are not too many schools that is a standalone school that have all the CTE programs and have the early college component as well. But I think that pretty soon, in the next 5 years, you'll start to see more schools like this.
And now to finish up, I know you're working hard in your research, and like you said, you're looking for the connection between career and technology programs and dropout rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell us about your research, briefly, and what are the things that you're expecting to find within that research?
Well, and I'm gonna I haven't looked at this data recently, so I'm gonna probably misquote it or whatever, but one of the pieces of data that I came across very early on in my research went something like this. When freshmen are interviewed, 90% of them say that they're gonna go to a 4-year college or university. That's their plan. But as they progress through high school, something happens, and only 70% of them actually fill out a college application to go. And so all of a sudden, 30% just drop off right there. And then of that 70% that actually fill out the application, only 30% of that group actually go to a 4-year university, and maybe like another 10% go on to get some sort of associate's degree or 2-year degree or diploma. And so once you take all of those people away, only 40% of the original group that started high school, only 40% actually graduate with some sort of any sort of diploma. And so that's a pretty scary thought. If the goal of an American high school, a public school, is to prepare students to be successful, but only 40% of the students are getting college degrees, then what's happening to the other 60%? And if they are not going to college and getting those degrees, then what is it that we are preparing them to be successful for? I believe that public schools, it is our job and it's our responsibility to prepare all of our students to have some sort of plan, some sort of success route post-secondary. So when they graduate from high school, that they have a plan. I'm going to now go and do this, and I'm going to be able to provide for myself and my family in this way. We need to set them up with skills to be successful. And college simply is not the answer for 100% of the students. And if that is the case, and I truly believe that it is, then it is our responsibility within the schools and within our communities to come up with some sort of solution and some sort of program to allow them to get there. You know, I was looking up some data here recently where I think in the last 20 years, and I have it here, in the last 20 years, if you were to look at all of the student debt that has been accumulated from all of the students that go to college, they take out student loans, that student debt in the last 20 years has grown by over 500%. Schools are more expensive now than ever. The average, in that same time period, the average college tuition for a private school has gone up by 150% in that stretch of time. For public schools in the last 20 years, it's grown by like 200%. And don't quote me 100% on those statistics, but it's pretty close to that. And so colleges are more and more expensive. The rate of tuition is outpacing our spending money and all that. It's outpacing inflation in our country, so it's more expensive to send students to college, and college degrees don't always prepare students for every single job. And so if we can save a family $150,000 and not send them to college, but give them the skills to do a job that they're actually interested in, then we need to be able to do that. We can't put every student into a box and say the only means to success, the only way to live out the American dream is to go to college. That's not the best message for every single student.
Absolutely.
Now, absolutely, it's the right message for many students, but not every single student. And so we need to come up with programs to get students there and to give them those skills to be successful.
But I think the key point what you said is about options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have a responsibility as educators and organizations to provide students with options. Like you said, not everybody fits in the same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think that's where career and technology play a big role.
Well, and the other thing too is, I've talked about providing options to where it's providing options for those that are not prepared for college, but CTE works beautifully too for those students that are going to go to college and are college bound. And like, here's a story. I worked with a lady in the last couple of years, and her son got his EMT certification. And so he took that into college, and then he was in pre-med. And in the summers, he worked as a paramedic or as an EMT through the summer, and he used that money to pay for much of his college tuition. And so he helped finance his college tuition. Now he's about to graduate from med school, and he was introduced to the medical community with that EMT job. And so he was arriving at all the crash scenes, and he was doing the medical procedures that EMTs and paramedics do, and he was rushing them to the hospitals, and so he sees the trauma units that are at work there. He sees the ER and all of that. And so he was given the opportunity to be exposed to a career, use that certification as a way of making money while he's in college to pursue that career. And we tell our students all the time, just because you're getting these industry credentials doesn't mean that college is out of the picture. Exactly the opposite. If you get a CNA certification, or you become a certified medical assistant, which you can do at our school, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a CNA or a CMA or whatever. You're not going to be a medical assistant for the rest of your life.
Right.
You're going to use this, and then you're going to go to school, and then you become a registered nurse, an RN, or maybe you want to be a doctor or whatever. And so this is just a means of exploring what it is that the students truly love and what they think that they want to do, and giving them a safe opportunity to play around with that stuff while getting a very good resume as they're going, because by the time they've done that for 4 years, if they choose to go to medical school, they have a whole host of experiences that they can draw upon, and they'll learn that new content much better. It's all about making connections and relationships for the student. It becomes more of a holistic approach to learning.
Absolutely. And like you said, it could be a parallel process, it could be a stepping stone, but absolutely it serves a purpose. Career technology serves a purpose for students to meet students' needs.
Mm-hmm.
Kai, I want to thank you one more time for being with us
No
today.
problem.
Folks out there, remember that we have this video and many others on Antonio Corrales YouTube channel. Let's talk about education with Antonio Corrales and StarlingEvaluationAssessment.com. Please help somebody today, and see you next time.
All right. Thank you.